Ratchet and Clank is a franchise I hold near and dear to my heart. While I never had a PlayStation 2 growing up, I did get a chance to play the games. I've been following the series for a while, and much like many platformers of this era, like Sly Cooper and Jack and Daxter, Ratchet and Clank was a big deal to me. Granted, part of that is being envious of not owning the systems as a kid, but over the years I've gone out of my way to obtain as many of the games in the series as possible. At the time of writing this, I'm only really missing 4 of the games and the HD collection for PlayStation 3. Before I start rambling though, let's enter the universe of Ratchet and Clank. So, Insomniac Games, fresh off their work on the original Spyro the Dragon trilogy, felt they did all they could do for that franchise and started to work on a new IP, leaving the Purple Dragon they had created to the hands of Universal Interactive, where I'm sure nothing bad would happen to the series. But what would be this new IP? They had tried a couple different ideas, but eventually settled on a fantasy setting with a female character inspired by Lara Croft and Zelda, with the working name of Girl with a Stick. Huh. Must be a working title. Anyway, this game honestly wasn't coming together this way the studio wanted. Eventually, the game would evolve into the first R&C game. I recommend that if you want any more detail, watch Golden Bolt's Ratchet and Clank retrospective, if you have about an hour and a half to spare. Now, as for the game itself, let's start with that story. And our Galactic Space series starts in a bit of a familiar way. Ratchet is working on a ship on the backwater planet of Veldin with hopes that one day he will be able to leave this rock and go fight the Empire or something. Unfortunately, the ship that Ratchet's working on is missing the robotic ignition system, which works as the keys to the ship. You would think that Ratchet would have something like this, but I guess he built this out of spare parts or something. Anyway, unless Ratchet can hotwire the ship, he's gonna be here for a while. Now, Ratchet is a Lombax, and to be fair, him being a Lombax isn't really important at this point in the series. Just know he's a weird, furry cat thing? I'm sorry, it's kind of hard to describe what a Lombax is. Heck, even having knowledge of future events, it's still kind of hard. Meanwhile, in the depths of space on another planet, giant murderous robots are being built, until one is built a little differently. This little guy is Clank, or
My serial number is B54296. Oops!
yeah, I'm just gonna call him Clank from here on because no one cares about the serial number. Clank conveniently finds an infobot that shows something sinister is going on and decides he's gonna blow the whistle. Oh, already a few minutes old and he already hates his boss. I can get that. Oh, and an infobot are these things, full of galactic coordinates and stuff. I don't know if it's ever explained. Eventually, Clank crashes onto Veldin and Ratchet goes to investigate. I guess either the planet isn't very big or he just happened to be lucky where he crashed. After a quick tutorial section that shows you the ropes, Ratchet finds Clank and then takes him back to his garage before going back to work on his ship. Suddenly, Clank wakes up and tells him, "Yo, I'll start your ship if you help me find a dude that can help me with this problem I have," before showing him the infobot he found earlier. That infobot reveals that Chairman Drek is planning on building a new planet by using parts of other planets. The residents of said planets be damned. Ratchet initially shrugs it off, but since Clank agreed to help him with his ship, they decide to work together to find Captain Quirk. Thus begins our journey across the stars to many different planets. I know I'm skimming through a lot of this, but to be fair, it's mostly for time, and I'm trying to skip past more unimportant parts of the story. Now, as Ratchet and Clank visit all of these planets, they learn more and more of what Drek is doing to them, and try and put a stop to them in any way they can. Of course, always being about a step or two behind the old chairman. Eventually, they find Captain Quark after winning a hoverboard race and saving a parody of Tony Hawk, saving the parody of Tony Hawk's agent, saving a mayor, and meeting a plumber who may or may not be a god. Didn't know where else to add that, but the interaction between Ratchet, Clank, and the plumber always cracks me up.
Look, plumber's crack.
What did you just say?
I said, look, the plumber's back.
All right, wise guy.
Oh, and I skipped past it, but they know where he is mostly because of a giant tech nerd who upgrades Clank's abilities. And by upgrades, I mean they give Clank the ability to hover. Not that I'm complaining, it actually is a nice upgrade. I mostly talk about these characters because they will be important later, except for the agent and the mayor. The hoverboarder is Skid McMarx, yes, I get the joke. And the tech nerd is Big Al, who not only is an important character, ends up actually helping in many of the games later.
I like him.
Anyway, after an obstacle course, Quark betrays the duo with a trap you most likely saw coming a mile away if you were paying attention to the cutscenes, and leaves them to be eaten by a Blargian Snagglebeak. Of course, Quark's plan fails because he didn't really take into account that Ratchet had his guns on him and didn't think to remove them. Yeah, they're easily gonna escape if you give them a chance of defending themselves. It's bad enough that he does the Bond villain thing and just expects them to die, but he should have at least made sure his foe was unarmed. To be fair, as the series progresses, we will see that Quark isn't the brightest. Feeling dumb that he quite literally fell for Quark's trap, Ratchet decides he's going to go across the galaxy just to kill Quark. He even attacks Clank for being gullible. Like, dude, calm down. Clank is, what, a week old at this point? How would he have known? This to me is one of the worst parts of the story, because while I still enjoy going from planet to planet, Ratchet is a bit of an insufferable asshole to pretty much the only other person that he knows in this galaxy. To some extent. I will say this, the 2016 movie game that is sort of a remake of this one does fix up that problem. Unfortunately, they kind of over-fix it, if that makes sense. Instead of being an insufferable asshole, Ratchet just gives up. Yeah. Honestly, I kind of wish we had a middle ground where he feels angry, but doesn't just suddenly attack who was probably his only friend. Except for Al. Al's cool.
I like him.
Anyway, seeing as they still need each other to go anywhere, they do continue to work together, at least until Ratchet can find a good excuse to get rid of Clank. I'm sure eventually he'll learn that leaving Clank on a planet means that he's stuck on that planet too. Clank, during the second act, keeps trying to tell Ratchet that Drek is the bigger threat here, with Ratchet more being blind with his hate boner for Quark, though he does eventually come around. Now, during the second act, a lot of things happen, and I am going to skim through it, but again, it's mostly for time. We help a general fight a war when all of his soldiers pretty much defected. We get a helmet for Ratchet to help him pilot certain ships, which, hilariously enough at this point, he probably could get rid of Clank, but he never does for some reason. We eventually get the O2 mask that allows us to breathe underwater and in space. And eventually we catch up to Quark after destroying basically an entire space station that Drek was running. And we get to fight Quark in probably one of the best space fights in the game. Also, somehow Quark, despite being, I think, a human, it's never really explained, he can breathe in space. I don't even know how that works, but he just does. It's not even just a weird thing for this one game. This is canon for the rest of the series. So, yeah, dude can breathe in space. Just wanted to mention that somewhere. Anyway, after finishing off Quark, Ratchet finally remembers that Drek was a thing, and he and Clank go to thwart his plans by destroying his robot factory, which leads to a nice moment with Clank and his computer mom. I am skipping through a few things again, but to sum up some of the other events that happen during this part before you get to Drek, they blow up a missile that can atomize a planet, get rid of Drek's troops on another space station, and win another hoverboard race just so that they can get a disguise to get into the robot factory.
Hi, this is Ratchet for Gadgetron hoverboards, and if you,
Yo, dudes, for the freshest boards in the galaxy, check out the new XZ88 from Gadgetron. It's so hot, it's cool.
I think I got the wrong guy.
At the end of the space station section, they learn that Drek has finished his new Frankenplanet and just needs to put it in its new orbit. That orbit being the same place where Veldin is located, Ratchet's home. And he plans on destroying Ratchet's home purely out of spite. There's gotta be no other way, because Ratchet and Clank have been thwarting his plans all game. So there's only one thing left to do. Go back to where the game all started. This final level is honestly the most cinematic and climactic of the game. Fighting through all of Drek's forces with all of the weaponry that you've obtained throughout the game is just cathartic. Eventually, after fighting through all of Drek's troops and getting to the chairman himself, he reveals the real reason he's doing this.
You think that's what this is about? Who do you think polluted our last world? I did. This is about one thing and one thing only. Cash! And lots of it. You see, I've been paid for every square inch of my new world. Once the inhabitants move in, I will begin polluting this world as well. Then the whole thing starts all over again. Ah, brilliant.
Yeah, his whole plan was to make money. people, animals, or even planets be damned? Well, seeing as we can't let him win, we eventually defeat him after a fairly hard battle. Or a fairly easy battle if you've gotten the Rhino at this point. With Chairman Drek defeated, his planetizer is flipped over, launching him onto his Frankenplanet. And with said planetizer now pointing at the planet, there's only one thing left to do. Ratchet hits the button and blows up the Frankenplanet. With large debris falling onto Veldin, Ratchet and Clank get knocked off the platform before Clank holds on for dear life. The servos in his arm end up breaking and they fall to the planet below, before Clank remembers he has the thruster pack upgrade and saves them just in the nick of time. Unfortunately, his arm is still broken, and Ratchet, still having a smidge of assholery, ends up shrugging it off and starts walking off, making Clank think for a moment that with the job done, Ratchet has no need for Clank anymore. Before, of course, Ratchet turns back around and says, "Hey, you still need to fix that arm." And they walk off into the sunset, being friends for the end of their days, or something like that. Now, again, I did skim through the story, so if you want a more in-depth look at the plot, I refer you once more to Golden Bolt's video, where he goes more in depth. Now, to be fair, that is a longer video, but it'll be worth it, trust me. As for the gameplay, the series is full of platforming and good old shooty bang bangs that you would get in shooters from the time. Granted, being more cartoony than those games. Having worked on Spyro before this proved that Insomniac could easily make a fantastic 3D platformer, and Ratchet & Clank is no exception. Hell, outside of Mario and Sonic, it's one of the few platforming series that's still going strong for the most part. The only thing is, they have taken a few years off for certain console generations, and it has been a couple years between the movie and the most recent game, Rift Apart, but Insomniac has been a bit busy in those years. The platforming in this game has always felt smooth and comfortable to me, same as the gunplay, and when those are the two major features of the game, it's no wonder why this is still considered a great series. Throughout your adventure, you get plenty of weapons and nice gadgets that make your journey more enjoyable. There are even gold bolts you can collect if you want to test your platforming and exploration skills in this game. And, returning from the Spyro series, there are skill points for a pseudo-achievement system if you want to try and get them all. There's even a New Game Plus mode, or Challenge mode as the series calls it, that gives you all the weapons and gadgets you bought throughout the game, and lets you have a blast with the ability to even upgrade certain ones to be more powerful. Just make sure you have some golden bolts for those. As for my thoughts, I have to say, this game is still great to go back to, and I usually replay this about once a year. I honestly love this franchise, and this first game, it's still great. That's not to say I don't have problems with this. First off, like I mentioned in the story, Ratchet comes off as an asshole after Quark betrays them. It's not until he defeats him in a battle that he even realizes he was a jerk to probably one of his only friends in the whole galaxy. Well, not only friend. There is Al.
I like him.
The controls are also a bit strange to go back to after playing the other games in the series. I know I said the game is comfortable, but I do sometimes wish that this game had the strafe system that later games incorporate. That, and there are some sections that I just dread going back to. I don't enjoy the hoverboard races, and the turret sections are just tedious to me. I may have been good at them as a kid, but every time a hoverboard section comes up, I've used cheat codes just to skip past them. I don't typically have time to try 4, 5, maybe up to 20 times just to get one item. It's not fun for me. Plus, the Clank sections just aren't fun, and unfortunately, they don't really get much better from here. That being said, most of the problems in this game, I can chalk up to it being the first game in a series, and just suffering from some growing pains. Luckily, many problems were fixed by the second game, and you know what? I think we'll do that one next. So join me next time as we go